Today is Star Trek Day, and as many of you know, there's already been a little controversy about this subject because of how small they made Captain Kirk on the poster. Well, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about my love for Star Trek. Star Trek came into my life because of my brothers. It was something I wasn't interested in. I was more interested in cartoons at the time. But because my brothers never gave up and didn't care what I wanted, I ended up watching Star Trek. And I'm so glad I did. Because of them, I ended up loving Star Trek. It's been one of the biggest things entertainment-wise in my entire life, and in many ways has shaped me into the person I am today. As many of you know, there's studies that show that people who watch science fiction often have larger vocabularies, are more verbose, communicate better with other people. And the opposite is true. But for me, I just loved the stories. I loved the characters. I loved what they stood for. Morals and values, doing what was right because it was right. And there wasn't all of this nonsense that we see going on today. You see, many people say Star Trek is dead. Star Trek is not dead. It's never going to be dead to me. I love Star Trek. Now, what they're doing now might not be something I'm interested in, and that's okay, because I have the past. I have all my memories of childhood, visions. I remember going to sleep and waking up and remembering all of the amazing dreams that I would have while I was listening to Star Trek in the background, getting to be captain of my own ship in my own mind. I mean, who wouldn't want that as part of your childhood? But these shows, each one of them, has a special place in my heart. The original series was what introduced me to Star Trek. The Next Generation deepened that love and took me further down that story than I ever thought would be possible. And then came DS9. DS9 showed us a different side of Star Trek, a Star Trek where it wasn't all about ships and exploration, but dealing with circumstances, sometimes just around one planet and one small group of people. And then we had Voyager, a lost ship trying to make its way home. What a great story idea. Wasn't my favorite of the series, but it was still Star Trek. Then we had Enterprise. Enterprise was something a little different, a little unique. I looked back to see how we got to Captain Kirk and Bones and Spock. And it gave us a different view of the story from a more historical perspective. And it was great. And I loved it. It wasn't the best Star Trek ever, but as I said before, it was Star Trek. And Star Trek is something that's special. It has a feel. It has something about it that no other science fiction has. It has heart and soul. It has lessons and teaching people what is right and what is wrong. Timeless traditions and timeless values, all taught within the bounds of this one great science fiction show with many, many parts. Then that brought us to the films, the major motion pictures, the first of which was, of course, Star Trek the Motion Picture, one of my all-time favorites. Many people don't like this particular film, but I love it. I love it for its cinematography, for its music, the music that went on to inspire and be used for the next generation itself. The acting was superb. The visuals in this particular film were just unbelievably great. It was a little slow, but it was Star Trek. It was that slow build to an amazing story about a machine that was sent away and came back to Earth and brought with it a wealth of knowledge and danger that the crew of the Enterprise had to survive, figure out, and move forward. This film introduced us, or should I say, reintroduced us to Star Trek, reintroduced us to the crew and the cast that we loved, and reintroduced us to one of the coolest versions of the Enterprise ever, the Enterprise refit, which is my personal favorite out of all of the starships. I love it, absolutely love that version of the Enterprise. It's the one I think of whenever I think of the Enterprise. But once again, we saw Gene Roddenberry's creation giving us hope, giving us a vision of the future that very few creatives have ever even thought of. Most creatives that do science fiction, they give us dystopias. They give us the worst case scenarios. And sometimes Enterprise and sometimes Star Trek did that. But most of the time, it was about hope, a peaceful future, a future where there were things worth fighting for, where old-fashioned morals and values were still alive and well, and it wasn't just anything goes. Now that's not to say there was a religious fervor, but there was morals, and that's what I loved about Star Trek. It wasn't moral ambiguity, it wasn't the opinions of the day, it was what was important, and being taught to us through a venue where they could take on topics that would have otherwise caused great strife and contention amongst the people discussing them. But Star Trek transcended that and helped us see stories in a way we never thought possible. Star Trek II was another one of these great movies that gave us exactly that kind of a view of Star Trek. It's the story of vengeance. It parallels the book Moby Dick that is mentioned in this, and what happens when vengeance is all someone can see, the destruction and the chaos they can bring to that person's life and everyone's lives around them. Gave us some of the greatest visual and some of my favorite space battle scenes of all time. I absolutely love Star Trek II. It is without a doubt my favorite out of all of them, only barely beating out the motion picture. All of the films were great. The films that went on with the Next Generation were not my favorite, but they were Star Trek. And that's what this is about. That's what this day should be about, Star Trek, and why we love it. I don't fault those people who love the new stuff, and I allow them their fandom. But I know what gave them the ideas to get the fandom they now have. And there were those of us who were here and helped build it all the way from the beginning. I love Star Trek. I love the opportunity it gives us to grow and learn together and to meet amazing people who also understand what Star Trek is to each and every one of us. Now, as I'm closing this out, I want you to sit and think about what you love about Star Trek and remember that and keep it in your heart today and let go of the anger and hate.